Welcome to Abstract Curiosity Podcast, your go-to spot for those eager to explore the world with a curious eye. I'm Rebeka, a 1-3 mental projector.
I'm Michelle, a 4-1 emotional generator. Come join us because life is an adventure, and sometimes we just need a funky new roadmap to navigate our way through this wild world. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our newest episode of Abstract Curiosity. We are so happy and grateful that you're here. I am Rebeka. I am joined with my amazing co-host, Michelle, and we have a super fun guest today. This woman has helped both of us in great many ways, and honestly, Abstract Curiosity wouldn't exist without her. Not to be dramatic, but it's true. So, welcome, Aubrianna. Thank you so much for sharing this space with us today.
Oh my gosh, talk about an intro. Thank you both for having me. I am so honored to be here, and I'm so happy that this connection happened. I know when we were all kind of in community, I'm like, Rebeka and Michelle, Rebeka and Michelle. So to see what this has flourished into is really such a delight and honor.
Yay.
It's been so fun. Yeah, so thank you. It's just amazing how it all kind of came together. So, as you know, we introduce ourselves with our human design and astrology stuff. So, people who listen to us pretty much know it. We said it in our intro. Would you want to introduce yourself with your human design and astrology?
Of course. So I am a 3-5 Manny Gen, and I am a Virgo Sun, Scorpio Moon, Capricorn Rising. So yeah, lots of emotion and lots of depth.
Yes.
That's why we love you. Oh, that's awesome. Awesome. Well, we're happy to have you on, and we're excited because we know, just knowing you for the time that we have, that you have gone through a lot of massive changes yourself. And we're always interested in sharing that to other people. Like, how can we all grow and learn through our experiences? And one of the ways we do that is talking about life transitions, because everyone has them, whether they believe in astrology and human design or not, it doesn't matter. You have these moments. And Rebeka and I have really dove into this concept of, like, if only people knew a different way of supporting themselves during these life transitions, how big and how much your life purpose would just percolate up without being so sometimes a slap in your face, such as Saturn return can feel like at times. And you have recently, it's been a few years, it's about 5 years basically, that you have gone through your Saturn return,
It's weird.
right?
2019 is supposed to be last year. It's not.
2019. I know,
It's not
right?
5 years ago.
And you've got some interesting tales to tell us about what it is you experience. So before you do that, we're just going to pop up really quickly. All right, so here we are. We're going to look at Aubrianna's chart. And this is really cool because we can actually take a look at the exact date. And of course, your Saturn return is before and the energy is after, right? There's like spans between it. But this happens to be the exact date, which is March 22nd, 2019. So, Miss Aubrianna, tell us a little bit about, do you remember what was going on? You were 28 years old. Your years hit a little bit younger. You know, a lot of people said like 29.5, but this tells everybody how different timing is for everybody. So yours was right around 28 years old. Tell us what it was that you might be experiencing at that time. Do you remember?
Oh yeah, I remember it vividly. Talk about a complete meltdown. So towards the end of 2018, I was sort of having a crisis where I had worked my way up. I was working in luxury sales and I was making really great money. I also was working as a healer and intuitive development teacher, and like that was thriving and everything was picture perfect on the outside. But something in me was like, I cannot do any of this anymore. And I was having a meltdown. I was like, I think I'm going crazy. I'm about to walk away from a 6-figure job. I'm about to walk away from a business that's generating 6 figures online, helping other people. And I was like, why am I not happy? I was like, from the outside, everything looked great. You know, I had built my business on Instagram and I was like, oh, I can go and do my business. And so I quit my job. I was like, nope, I don't have another job. I don't know where I'm going. I was like, I have my business online. And I knew, I was like, that's not what I'm meant to be doing. I was like, but it's making money. I'll go for it. So that was the end of 2018.
Okay.
By March of 2019, I had gone into a really bad depression,
Mm.
not working my business anymore. I had pretty much crumbled it to the ground. I was doing DoorDash, Uber. I was working as a promo girl in Costco for like this natural energy drink, trying to do all of the things to not go back to corporate because it just, everything felt out of alignment. Like everything I had built was like, nope, none of this is going to work for you anymore. And I remember like my mom, my partner at the time, just looking at me like, what is going on with you? They're like, you walked away from a great job. You like crumbled your business that was making really good money for you to the ground. You're like living off your savings. You're picking up these like gig economy jobs. And I had nothing to rely on but like my inner knowing.
Mm.
I've always been really spiritual. I went through my spiritual awakening in 2012. And so I knew that there was something. I didn't know it was my Saturn return, for goodness sakes. But I knew I was like, nothing in my life is working. I'm not meant to do any of this. And I have to just release it all and figure it out. So I was quite literally in a mental meltdown. I like didn't know what was happening. Nobody knew what was going on with me. I didn't even know what was going on with me. And I really felt like it was like that burning everything to ashes to like rebirth something, but I couldn't see through the fog of like, what is this next thing that I'm rebirthing?
Ah, okay. Interesting. And what I love about it is that we can look at in human design, we can look at it. It was hitting gate. It was hit gating. I can't talk. Hit. It's hitting gate 25 was the sun in all of that. You want to chat about that for a second, Miss Rebecca, about
Yeah,
25?
I was just looking at that too because it's the cross of the vessel of love, was what you were going through then, which is all about love. And 25 is universal love, like spiritual, really connecting to this deeper level of yourself. So it makes so much sense too when we're looking at what's going on with you and what was really shining in that time. That 25 is just moving you to that connection of divine love and moving you into your place. And when we look at your actual Saturn 54 and 61, so yeah, that 54 coming out of the root, all about transformation.
Yeah, and a lot
Yeah.
of that with Gate 51 too is like I've got to make it on my own. I've got to be independent. I know when to do that, but yeah, that's pretty telling, right? In my opinion, I think that's really telling of what you were going through in that moment. Is like owning that. Not that you weren't doing it before, but that you had another opportunity. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, as I always do, Rebecca. Go ahead.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly it. It's just so fascinating to look at these things and to see how it tells the story of what was going on. So, so what happens next? Like you're in this space, you're trying to figure stuff out, you're doing little gig jobs,
Yeah.
and then what?
So basically, what happened next was I had kind of closed down my spiritual development, intuitive healing business. And I still had like some regular clients who just stuck with me, who would like text me, who would be really patient with me when I was like, "Ugh, I can't take a session right now. Like, I just can't. I'm not in the energy." And then I had one of my clients who was like, "Listen, you have like a long history in sales. I was doing over $1 million a year in the job that I had left. I had built my business on Instagram as a healer, as an intuitive development teacher, over six figures over the past really since like 2016 to 2018.
Mm.
Mm.
And so one of my past students who learned healing from me, who was very clairvoyant, was like, would you mind helping me build my business? Like, I know you're kind of in between. Could you come up with something for me to help me build my business? And I was like, yes. I'm like, I need a project. I need
Yeah.
something. I'm like, this feels so good because what was really out of alignment was I felt like I was living in two worlds. It was like the hyperstructural, like sales job that was like up at 4 a.m. answering clients, across the world, a lot of pressure, a lot of sales goals. And then I was in this like super flowy space of like intuition and like the energy. And I was feeling at a crossroads. So this client came to me and was like, can you build something for me And my very first package was like $400. It was like a business blueprint. We sat down, we looked at her offers, and she started to just like get results. And I was like, okay. I was like, this feels really good. I'm like, I might be on to something.
Mm.
I undoubtedly though went through like all of my savings. So I was like, dang, I'm like, this feels really good. I'm like, but I cannot live. I'm like, I can't pay my bills. So I made a plan. I was like, okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to do some corporate consulting. And so I went out, I did a little corporate consulting, and then someone who met me in consulting was like, listen, I want you to be a headhunter for North America for C-suite execs in the medical and tech industry. I was like, I have no background in that. She's like, you're a natural salesperson, get in here. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
And I reluctantly took that job because I was like, I don't want a job. Everything in me was like, but I felt like I need to pay my bills. I lived in Los
Right.
Angeles. My partner was like, you need to make money. And I was like, yeah, I do need to make some money actually. And while I had my $400 offer, that was not going to pay, thousands of dollars in rent.
Hmm.
So I gave myself a 6-month timeline. I was like, I will go back for 6 months and I need to get this business off the ground in 6 months. And that's pretty much exactly what I did is I
Mhm.
went into Instagram. There was no TikTok at the time. I didn't even have an email list. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to start offering like spiritual business coaching where I can really blend my two worlds. I was like, I love selling. I love business. I mean, I used to go around starting my own businesses when I was a little kid, like knocking on doors, like, hey, can I wash your car? And so I always loved like having that independence and that control over like my income and being able to reach goals. But I always hated the approach of like what
Mhm.
I would be forced to do. Even in the consulting jobs, it was like a lot of cold calling, being told to lie to just get the right person on the phone, like
Hmm.
genuinely like just pretend that you're calling back about an appointment. And I'm like, I I'm not gonna do that.
Right. Right. Yeah. Good old typical male masculine type of tactics. I get that. Yeah. Go ahead.
And so I raged against that and I just never listened anyway. I'm very hard-headed. It's probably the Capricorn rising. I don't know. But I always was a top performer because I found another way. So when I was doing corporate consulting, I utilized LinkedIn because I was like, oh, I did this on Instagram. Like I can do it here. And so after I was approaching like the 4-month mark in the headhunter role,
Hmm.
my business was already generating enough income to match my corporate salary. And I was like, okay, this is what I need. It wasn't enough to match my salary plus commission, but it was enough of a leap of faith to be like, I can live on that income.
Mm.
At that same time, that job approached me and was like, can you go and do a national sales training? And I was like, no, because I
Wow.
want to sell my secrets to corporate, first of all. And two, I knew deeply that I was using manifestation techniques. I was using energetics. I was using attraction marketing. And I'm like, y'all had written me up for not meeting my cold calling. I'm like, but you want me to go do sales training? And I was just like, this is not an alignment. You do not want my way of sales. I'm
Right.
like, I don't do cold outreach. And so I had gotten so many hand slaps there,
Mhm.
but I knew that they wouldn't fire me because I came in and was instantly a top performer and people were requesting. And I was like, you are out of your damn mind. And
Yeah.
that was like the universe
Okay.
in my face.
Yeah.
No kidding. So okay, am I hearing this right? It's like
Yeah,
you come in, you're doing an amazing job,
yeah,
but you're not doing it the way they want you to do it, so then they punish you. They're like,
yeah. We would start at 8 a.m. and they had a metric because they
Mhm.
tracked our outbound calls.
"Oh my gosh, this
They
stresses
were
me
like,
out
you
so
need to
bad."
have 20 calls done by 8. And I'm like, well, I don't start until 8. People would go in and dial their own cell phone like 20 times to meet that metric. And I'm just a no BS kind of gal. I was just like, you know what? Write me up then or fire me. But I was a little bit like secure in the fact of I knew what I could deliver. And so every time they'd be like, do you know why you're here? You didn't meet your metrics. And I'm like, but I met my sales goal.
Right. So
And what
that's
pays
what
the
makes
bills.
me,
Mhm.
yeah, that's what makes me so confused. Like, why, like the fact that they were so focused on you're not doing it our way instead of, hey, you're top performing and you're not doing it our way. Tell me more.
I think that's what clicked for them when they were like, "Hey, can you do the sales training?" And I'm like, I'm all about creating change and creating new ways and new like lenses of doing something. But I could feel that I was going to be met with resistance for my method every single step of the way. I'm like,
Wow.
it took y'all 4 months of someone to come in here and do it completely different, have a spectacular results for you to sit down and be like, hey, maybe we should check this girl out. Took a little
Yeah,
too
that's yeah, right?
long.
Right? Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's funny because I feel like when I was in sales, it was the exact same thing, and it was a male generated business, like, you were churning so much up of me, but I existed in the time where they couldn't monitor us. Now, like you're saying, like, they can monitor your computer, your car, because I was in sales and I was literally driving around. Like, nowadays, like, that would have even set me even more into a panic, like, and funny, as we're walking to the age of Aquarius, more people are like, that's why jobs are not getting filled, in my opinion, is because there's
Mhm.
just too much monitoring. And people are like, dude, I want the job and I want the benefits, but like, this is too much. Like, I can't handle it. Why I always say by 2050, 50% of the population is going to have their own business because the internet gives it to us all. So I love it how
Mhm.
you were able to like listen, this was at a young age. Like, let's just slow
Yes.
the boat on what you're saying because when I was your age, I could not have done or said what you did or said, um, and been so confident about. And by the way, having a six-figure business in your
Mhm.
spiritual world on TikTok so you were in your early mid 20s when that hit.
Yeah, on
Yeah.
Instagram, because TikTok actually wasn't around
Oh,
yet.
that's true. Yeah, right.
Uh,
Right.
but what's so interesting is I think because that role that I had left, I actually did do national training for the store. So they flew me to Chicago, to New York, and they offered me an opportunity to go to London to train in all of their backend systems and their salespeople. Mind you, I started with that company as basically like the stockroom bitch girl. I'm not gonna lie. It was like, go get
Mm.
this cashmere sweater, go do this, like check it in, steam all the clothes. I had no sales experience and they took a chance on me and I ended up really thriving again by creating a different way of selling that was more real, that wasn't so she. And
Mhm.
at that time I was also larger than I am now. I existed in a larger body. So these clothes lent themselves really beautifully to plus size women. And so I would actually model the clothes when everyone else was this big in the store for women who wanted to see it on a real body.
Oh, I
Yes.
love that.
And so when I like did training there, I was like, oh, like this sales thing is really a gift. Like people want real connection. So when
Mhm.
I had that opportunity for headhunting, I was like, you know what? I'm like, there's something here that I need to make my own and be able to do it the way I really want to do it. Because how could I tell them? Like there was roles that they were searching 6 months, a year for that I came in and filled in like a month. But I literally manifested those candidates. And I'm like, how do I tell them that? They're like, we looked everywhere. How'd you find this random person in the middle of Nebraska? And I'm like, honestly, I don't know what to tell you. I'm like, how do I tell you that? I'm like, well, I put them on my post-it note and I like manifested that I would fill this position and like along with the sales action, right? How do I explain that to them? You tell me.
Well, that's the problem is that they're and I think it's gonna have to change because as things dissipate, right? Like doing it more of the feminine way, right?
Yeah.
Which is what that is, it becomes very difficult for people to comprehend. Like, is that really real? Like, well, yeah, you don't have to be so forceful as you used to be. And you work with some incredible people, if I remember right. Did you not?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Especially in sales, we worked with a lot of big names, right? So like Tony Robbins' wife was one of my clients, Oprah, Pauletta Washington, and even Shirley MacLaine. So I got to have like really deep spiritual conversations, like in the store where we just
Mm,
like have tea, and they'd spend $10,000 on ready to wear clothing. And it was really
wow.
eye-opening to like heal my money wounds in that way, as well as like getting spiritual mentorship from like these women who were just so in tune with a world that I did not grow up in. I cried for like the first 3 months in that role just because of I didn't feel worthy. I had no luxury background. I had no sales. Like I was larger than everybody else on the floor. And so it was like such a healing process working in that role because I grew up very poor. I did not have clothes. Like they had to give me clothing to wear to work that role
Wow.
because
Okay.
I didn't have the aesthetic and I didn't have the means to buy the aesthetic because I came from a $30,000 position into a commission role and I was brand new, didn't have any money. I'm like, yeah, I'll sell. Just put me out there, coach, tap me in. And it opened my eyes to possibilities that I didn't know existed. And women talking about things beyond, just like our daily lives, like talking about spirituality, talking about like quantum physics in ways that I'd never been exposed to.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about so three. I mean, the three that you had listed off, well, there was four, but like they were all very much into
Yeah.
more of the existential ways of doing things. That's flipping incredible. And it's interesting too because here's the thing for people who are listening to this who may not be familiar, like, well, what is Saturn all about? Like, what is the return? It's kind of everything you just listed, right? Like, you're here to kind of learn all about like responsibility, right, in a different way. Are you in alignment with what it was? Are you facing you're going to have to face challenges, and how you face your challenges, and god dang, the way you face your challenges is really quite inspiring from somebody who had it a long time ago, who just kind of felt like she fell apart and had no internet to understand what the heck was going on during it. So
Yeah.
I love this story because it empowers other people to realize what you didn't probably know your Saturn return at that point in time, right? Like you said, you
Yeah.
didn't know you were going through it, but you
Mhm.
had enough wherewithal because you'd studied your spiritual side and you were in tune with all of that aspect. That's an interesting aspect to think about that with Saturn return. I never thought about it in that aspect. You know what I mean? Like, the more you're in tune and in touch with yourself and can hear what it is that, no, I shouldn't be doing this, or I'm only going to do this for a limited period of time, which is what I see a lot. Don't you, Rebecca? When it comes to the Saturn return, is that we seem to always put like mandates on ourselves. Like, I'm going to give myself this period of time to do this thing because I know it's not right for me, but I'm going to do it anyways. And typically it has to do with monetary type of stuff. That's interesting.
Mhm.
Very interesting.
The
Hmm.
Saturn return time is just so intense. It really is like someone described it once as like Saturn's like the school principal, right? And it's getting you in line. It's like, what are you doing? You're not following the rules. You're not going on your path. Detention for you. And
Attention for you. So true.
And I just want to add on to that something so interesting. It's like, oh, you're doing the wrong things. And I think that, like in my case, from the outside, I had so much praise from people like, oh, you're running a
Mhm.
successful business. Like, you're doing everything right. Like, oh my gosh, you've got a great career. Like, you've got a retirement, you have health benefits. And so that kind of really messed with my mind where
Yeah.
Saturn came in and was like, you're doing everything wrong when the world and society was like constant validation, constant praise. Oh my gosh, you're right on the right path. Like you're living the dream that your mom couldn't, make happen for herself. And so it's so funny to think of Saturn return of like getting you into alignment. And it's true, but sometimes that alignment comes at the cost of what society is telling you is alignment.
I'm
thousand
so
percent.
glad you called that out because it's so true. Yeah. Yeah. And I see this too, where I'll meet people when I would do TikTok lives and I would do readings, and so many people would come through and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm 28, 29, 30, and I don't know what I'm doing. And, all this stuff is falling apart. And I was like, well, yeah, of course it is. Like, you're fine. And Because there's so much pressure. Like, for some reason, we think that we're supposed to have life figured out by 30. Like, no.
Not even close.
Oh my gosh.
Not even close. So out of all of that you experienced, what do you think was the biggest life lesson that you learned in all of it? And maybe there's more than one.
I think the biggest thing was like listening to my inner guidance. Like everyone told me I was crazy to quit my job. Everyone, all of my clients were like, no, don't close your business. Oh my gosh, no. Like everything around me was telling me that it wanted me to stay where I was.
Mhm.
But if I would have stayed there, like I was so unhappy. I was having panic attacks just going into work. Like I knew inside, like this is not for me. But
Mm,
everything around me was telling me, stay put, stay with security, stay in the good job, stay with the health benefits, stay with the money. But I had to listen to that part of me that was like, no, like this isn't right. I have to let there be trust. I have to let it all crumble and see what happens after the dust settles. And it was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done to just walk away from everything, walk away from the status, the security. Like I didn't have health insurance at that time because I was like, well, just walked away from the job.
Mhm.
And I had to take a lot of criticism. People telling me, like, you were dumb, like you had it easy, like you were so good at that job. Why did you do this? And so being able to hear yourself in an echo chamber of everybody telling you that you're doing something wrong, even though you inherently know that it's right, was a huge, huge lesson in surrendering.
mm,
Mhm.
And I don't wish it on anyone, but if it's meant for you, like you will know because my body was screaming at
Mm.
me that it was the right move, even though nobody could understand it except for myself.
yeah.
Mm.
And you probably couldn't verbalize it even if you wanted to.
No.
It's
I think
like, I
everyone
just
was just like,
know.
there she goes. She's off the deep end.
Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes too, like our life experiences up until then, right? Like when we're dependent on our guardians, our parents, whoever's helping to take care of us. And I think a lot of our life experiences also, like what was the belief system within your own home life? And I don't know the answer to that from you. Like when you were growing up, what was it like? Like what was the belief system about careers and s- s- staying up with the Joneses? What was your experience like when you were little?
Well, I grew up pretty poor and
Mm,
experienced a lot of homelessness. Like my parents both struggled with addiction early on in life. My mom later got a little bit more stable, but was with someone very abusive, alcoholic home. And so there was this thing sort of drilled in, like go to school, like that's your way out of this life. Like go to
mm,
school, get a degree, like get a job, find a safe job. My dad was like a carpenter and a painter, so he would work to get money and then to support his habit. And so it was a lot of up and down fluctuation. So it was like entrepreneurship is not safe. Don't do that. Don't end up like your dad. Go to school, get a good job. Like that was the narrative that was
mhm,
ingrained. Even though when I look at my grandparents owned a business, my mom worked in that business growing up, but it was very hard. Like it was pumping concrete. Like it was not always very profitable. And so there was all this underlying energy around entrepreneurship not being safe. The only way to create safety is go to school, get a degree, get a good job.
mm.
Mm,
Yeah, and it's interesting too because her life theme, I think this because listen, we've always got to take it back to human design and astrology, right? Yours is the Phoenix, right?
Mm-mm.
Um, Gate 59 and Miss Rebecca. So we're talking about the Phoenix rising, but isn't there three different levels of that? Because I think it's interesting when we understand it's gate 59. Tell me where that is again. Isn't
And
that
the
ridiculous?
sacral going out to the solar plexus.
Oh, right here. Hello.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm the worst. You can tell me any number and it takes me forever to find it, but I can tell you what the information is about them. When people tell me the number, Rebecca's always got to guide me. Where is it at? Okay. So the sacral center, it's the action place for you and really trusting in those connections that you have with people and with yourself, right? That's interesting because and gate 55, right? Okay, there we go. And gate 55, which comes out of your emotional center. My husband has this one too. And I always find that when he can tap into more of his abundance through faith without having it in front of him, without saying, I've got to have this X amount of things in my life, but really simply slipping into the factors of, can I appreciate what I have right now? And I think it sounds like with your upbringing, knowing that money was a scarcity, that
Mhm.
that could have been quite a driving force for you. And I can only imagine how people would within your family world look at you and say, you made it, right? You've got some stable income. What the bleep are you doing? And then
Yeah.
you're like, because I'm not happy. And they're like, what? Like, how can you do
Yeah.
that? Like, that is huge at that age to give yourself permission to do that. And I'm assuming for you, it was kind of like a non-negotiable. You're like, nope, if I'm not happy, I can't do this anymore. Is that true for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I've always been that way with my family.
Mm.
I've always just kind of done and then informed them later. And that's how I've gone about everything. Even when I came out, like, as queer and I was like dating a woman, I was just like, hey, want to be my girlfriend? Like, that was my coming out. It was so ultra casual. And they're just like, wait, what? I'm like, yeah, like, keep up. Like, where are you? What's going on? And so when I left my job, it was like, oh,
Mm.
yeah, by the way, I left my job. Oh, by the way, this is happening. And because I can't ask for permission from people who aren't doing what I want to do. And so I
Mm.
Mm.
always saw it as like, this is something I have to co-create. This is something I have to do. And if they think I'm crazy, well, I'm kind of on my own anyway, right? They're not offering like financial support or, I mean, even emotional support really at that time. And so my happiness was my priority because I'm the only one who's experiencing this like little portal that I've created. And
Yeah.
I couldn't even breathe going into work. Like I would go in and by 2 hours, I was like, I can't breathe. Like I can't be here. And I was
Mm.
leaving work early because I was so like everything was telling me like you can't do this.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well,
Mhm.
and I love too, because you're talking about love, which is
Yeah.
interesting because in during your Saturn return, you had gate 10 coming off of your heart center, which is the other big whammy up here of the which is all about having that faith in love. And when you are in love with life, everything becomes aligned. And I think that's really interesting how you just said that. Like I wasn't in love with it. And even though I was panicking about it, if I don't follow this, it's going to feel impossible. And it's so interesting when we can see the intricacies of this through the eyes of human design after you've been through it, right? Like had you gone through it before, we would have, we probably would have told you, hey, keep an eye on like those things that you really love because they're really kind of guiding you there. But for you, you instinctively, and most people do, you have this instinctively of knowing, but having the power to do it, the empowerment to do it is flipping amazing. Okay, I'm going to pop out of this, you guys, before I make you jump there. Okay, there you go. There you go. That's awesome. So do you have any advice just as somebody who's kind of walked through this and that you're a spiritual person yourself and really are in tune with the energies of, the more than what we see in our real world. If someone were to come to you and say, "Hey, I'm really struggling with what I'm doing for a living," what would be something that you would want to offer them? What would you want to say to them? What would be
I
your
would
guiding
honestly
advice?
tell them to like lean into that inner voice. And I think that something I struggled with at that time was like intuition versus intrusion,
Mm.
which is like, is it my intuition telling me to do this, or is this an intrusive thought based out of fear, based out of societal expectations, based on familial expectations? And what it's kind of come down to for me is that like intuition is never going to send you into a panic. Like when I knew that I had to leave that job, it came in like waves of contraction where I was like, yes, I know. Like that was the energy. I was like, I know, I hear you,
Mm.
I know. Where staying was like, no, you have to stay because of the da, da, da. And my body was like, oh my God, I can't stay, but how am I going to live? And I would spiral. And
Mhm.
so I think if you're like in this decision of like, is this what I'm meant to be doing? Or like, should I go for this? Is there a knowing where you're like, dang, I don't want to listen, but I know that this is the thing. Like there's that I know energy of like, okay, mom, yes, I hear you,
Yeah.
versus I'm in full on panic. I'm in full activation. Like this is coming and sourcing from a place of fear. When you can discern between those two, you'll really start to be able to hear and have more clarity of what your inner voice is really telling you. And I think that that's probably the most powerful thing you can give yourself in a Saturn return, is like that clarity of listening to your own voice, because everyone else's voice is just going to cloud your judgment.
Mm. I love that.
That's beautiful and a wonderful way to describe it too. I know people have asked me that too, like, how do I know if it's intuition or
Yeah.
not? And it is hard to discern, I think, when you're beginning that journey and when you have something like your health and safety and
Mhm.
well-being on the line, it can be really intimidating. So thank you for that distinction.
Yeah.
Hmm. And even looking at it from the point of view that you're a man gen, right? Like going through this as a manifesting generator and knowing that, a lot of the times
Mm.
your energy type is the type that's going to kind of pop into things at times and then say, but this is enough, got to go into another direction, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I wonder, and I'm just thinking it from my perspective, like all three of us are different energy types, which is kind of cool to look at it from a
Mhm.
broader perspective, right? Like a man gen can pop in and out of things, right? A generator is supposed to be kind of staying pretty steady Eddie and solid, which I never did, but I tried. I tried to grind it into myself. Like I got the state job. I should be here the rest of my life, right? It was such a hard should. And for you as a projector, like interesting, like the bird on the wire, where was it for you, Rebecca, more that you were kind of like you had to pull yourself out to kind of observe? Like I know that's very general, but do you know what I mean? Like I wasn't able to pop myself out and to observe the whole thing when I was going through it. I was just like a hot freaking mess. But um, was that what it was like for you? Like, what was your defining moment, Rebecca, when you had yours as a projector?
My
Curious.
Saturn return.
Yeah.
There was a deep knowing as well. Mine was more
Okay.
around my marriage. Like by the time my Saturn return came around, I had already been married for 7.5 years and had two kids, and I was just, I felt like I was drowning, and I
Mm,
felt, I remember I remember I would go to the gym and I was in this spin class, and this teacher would put quotes on the whiteboard every day. And there was one that said, in the end, you will regret what you didn't do more than you regret what you did. And I was like, okay, I've got to go. It's time to go back to school and figure out
wow.
myself. So
Wow.
yeah.
That's a that's a pretty broad, like reading something like that and then taking that from it. That's pretty substantial. And I am going to say it in kind of like a projector way. It was a big picture thing. You saw something in that, right? I probably would have read that and started crying. I know, but I'm not really sure what to do. Oh
Oh my
my
God.
God. It's so amazing to watch all this for everybody. It's very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
Oh man.
All right. So, any last parting words? We will put your information in the links that we can for you. But is there anything else you'd like to share with the world before we sign off here, Aubrianna?
Well, thank you both for having me and giving me
Mhm.
space to kind of like share my story and the way that, energy really influences and how we engage with the world. And I really do believe that. So looking through this lens was so fascinating also for me. But I think if any of you listening to this are kind of going through a rough moment, a transitional period, since that's sort of our theme here, whether it's a Saturn return or not, because I'm also coming out of a year-long transition again in my life, something that has been sort of a cornerstone is like not feeling like you have to do everything right now. Like just
Mhm.
move in 1%. Whether it's, like Rebeka going back to school, whether it was me, choosing to leave a job, like you don't have to make a decision right this second. Give yourself the time to work with your body and listen to your body to see what's one thing I can do right now to just help me move in the right direction, even if it's like a general direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I would say to anyone in like a huge transition is just like move in the general vicinity. Like you don't
Mm.
have to have like the specific map, make a right, 12 degrees. Like you just start moving in the right direction. It'll alleviate some pressure.
Yeah.
Mm.
Clarity can come through for you.
That's great advice. 'Cause I think a lot of the
Wonderful.
times, yeah, we have the tendency to think that we got to do it right now. We got to be perfect at it. And our adrenals are burned out. And a lot of times that's what happens during Saturn return is people's adrenals get fried because they're trying to manage everything and not knowing how to find that support for themselves can really muck things up for a while. So at least that was my experience. My adrenals got fatigued. So, anyways, that's awesome advice. Go slow. Listen to that softer voice, not the loud screaming voice, because that's typically the ego and not the intuition speaking. That's beautiful. All right. Thank you so much for coming on Abstract Curiosity. We are so happy to have you here. And until next time, you guys, always take that time during your day to ask yourselves, how good can it get? Thanks again.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.